Are traps ever fun in your D&D game, or do they just punish players for walking into a room? No more hit point tax. Let's run traps the right way. I'm sure it's happened to you because it's happened to me. Your party walks into a chamber, they don't realize they've activated a pressure plate until acid starts raining from the ceiling, and by then it's too late. They're punished for not obsessively searching for traps in every room. They get ticked off and demoralized. Then anytime they come to a new room or corridor or tunnel, it goes like this. I extend my sword into the room. Nothing happens. I toss some rocks into the room. Nothing. I throw the halfling into the room. Hey there, adventurers. I'm Judd, and this is Short Rest Studios, where we believe fun builds community. Traps have been part of D&D and tabletop role-playing games since the beginning, but the rules on them are limited. I think this fact, along with possibly misunderstanding some other rules and character abilities, leads a lot of DMs to run traps the way I described earlier. But today, I'm going to give you some tips to help you run traps in a way that doesn't punish your players for nothing, but creates tension and excitement and fun. And the last tip literally changed the game for me. You want to stick around for it. I know these aren't the only great tips out there for running exciting traps. I would love for you to share yours in the comments. First, we need to think about the reasons for our traps. The DMG talks about kinds of traps, but not really about the reasons for them. But a couple of years ago, Matt Colville posted a video in which he talked about the purpose for or reason behind traps in our games, and he named 4 different ones. Traps remind your players that a location can be dangerous whether there are monsters there or not. If your party is exploring a dark dungeon and they haven't encountered any traps, an empty room will lead them to let their guard down. You don't want to overuse traps. Too many can be as frustrating for players as poorly run ones. But if they had to avoid a pit trap inside the entry and that 50 gold pieces they found earlier was in a trapped lockbox, they're more likely to stay on their guard. Even in an empty room, there will be tension and suspense because they're expecting something to happen. And if, you're a sadist, it'll give you a chance to mess with them a little bit, get them to let their guard down, then spring an Indiana Jones style rolling boulder trap on them. Not that I would ever do anything like that to my players, and I'm sure you wouldn't either. Traps can also crank up the drama in any scenario. Say your players are in a close battle with a bugbear and his goblin minions. They're squeezed into a tight dungeon hallway with barely enough room to maneuver. Somebody hits a pressure plate, scything blades start swinging from the ceiling. You've just added one more layer of tension and drama. You could simply use a trap like this to elevate the conflict for your players, but the beauty of it is that it can create tension for your PCs and their enemies. The goblins could be split in half by those blades just as easily as the characters. Traps can also exist to split the party so they can't bring all their abilities to bear on the monsters. Colville uses the example of a classic portcullis trap here. One of the characters steps on a pressure plate, causing a portcullis to drop in the middle of a dungeon corridor. 2 members of the party are on one side and 2 are on the other. This gives the enemies a chance to divide and conquer. And finally, a trap can be an encounter on its own. I'm going to bring up Indiana Jones again. A great example of this is in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the room with the pressure plates that shoot darts from the walls. Indy has to carefully walk across the room, stepping only on the small stones that don't trigger the darts. This particular example maybe doesn't offer enough variety for a D&D encounter, but a more complex trap like this, maybe combined with a puzzle, can make for a truly fun and challenging encounter all on its own. Now let's talk about passive perception. This is an ability every character has to one degree or another, and a lot of DMs don't like it. But again, I think this comes from a misunderstanding of what passive perception actually is and how it should work. The 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide actually gives us 2 ways for players to detect traps. If a player is actively looking for traps, they roll a perception check, and if their check equals or beats the stated DC, then they find it. If you've ever failed your perception check, do me a favor, hit that like button. The other way for PCs to find traps is this. You can check your party members' passive perception, and if anyone's is equal to or higher than the trap's DC, they find it. Actually, what the DMG says is that they'll find something. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it in just a second. There are two things we DMs often get wrong here. If your players walk into a room and automatically trigger a trap, there's a really good chance it's your fault. And I know because I've done this. We operate as if the PCs have to be actively looking for traps in order to see the evidence of one, and that assumption can slow exploration down to a crawl. Not a dungeon crawl, but like slow, like a baby, like a slow baby crawl, you know. The second mistake we make is this. Say a player rolls a perception check to look for traps. They roll a 7. There's a trap there, and the DC is 12. Based on that roll, the character doesn't find evidence of a trap, but their passive perception is 15. We forget or ignore the role that passive perception plays here. Here's the point. If the PC's passive perception is equal to or higher than the DC, they don't need to roll. And if you make them roll, you're doing it wrong. According to Jeremy Crawford, passive perception is always on, unless the character is suffering from some condition that affects it. That means it acts as a floor for what the character can notice without trying at all times. That's how it's designed. And some DMs are out there right now saying, well, that's too easy. Well, sure it is. When you just say, oh, your passive perception is 15, you see a pit trap. But look at what the DMG says on page 120. Characters might notice an uneven flagstone that conceals a pressure plate, spot the gleam of light off a tripwire, notice small holes in the wall from which jets of flame will erupt, or otherwise detect something that points to a trap's presence. Whether it's passive or a perception check, there's nothing that says the character automatically finds the trap. They find evidence of the trap, and you, the dungeon master, are in control of how much evidence they perceive. Then, of course, it's up to you to adjudicate what happens when they begin to look more closely at the trap and try to disarm it. Adventurers, you clearly cannot roll a perception check without dice. So head over to mistymountaingaming.com and use code SHORTREST to get 10% off their incredible variety of high-quality, gorgeous dice. From acrylic to gemstone, liquid core to metal, glass to bone, Misty Mountain has every kind of dice imaginable, and they're all covered by a lifetime warranty. Plus, Misty Mountain has a veritable smorgasbord of gaming accessories, bags, dice trays, DM screens, apparel, and even tea. Get your 10% off today with code SHORTREST at mistymountaingaming.com. The next tip I have for you, leave clues for your players. This will hint to them that they need to be on the lookout. Put an old dry skeleton next to that treasure chest in the corner. Maybe they open a door and there's a faint, sickly, sweet odor that, unbeknownst to the party, comes from poison gas. Or there's a bit of scorched and pitted bone in that chamber where the acid rains from the ceiling. This really is simple and straightforward, so the only other thing I'll say about it is don't worry about being too obvious. Go ahead and telegraph it. There's a really good chance your players will just ignore it and spring the trap anyway. It'll just make it more fun. All right, here's the fourth and final tip, the one that literally changed the game for me. Use the click rule. You can find the click rule on Reddit, on YouTube, anywhere people are talking about D&D, but the first time I heard about it, it completely changed the way I ran traps. Here's how the click rule works. Your party turns onto a long stone chamber. Sconces line the walls at 20-foot intervals, casting dim, flickering light the length of the hallway. The paladin takes a step forward and you hear a soft click. He stepped on a pressure plate. You have only an instant to act. What do you do? In that example, the click rule uses a literal click, but of course it doesn't have to. They could feel a flagstone sink under their foot, or the pressure of a tripwire at their ankle, or the cracking of wood under them as they step onto a hidden pit trap. Now they know they've sprung a trap and they have milliseconds to act. Don't give them the effects of the trap yet. The key here to create the excitement and tension you want your players to experience is to have them respond quickly before they know what's going to happen. Give them a beat, and if they can't respond quickly enough, their character doesn't react and they can't avoid the trap. Otherwise, based on the action they decide on, you could give them advantage or disadvantage on the saving throw. Maybe the paladin leaps backward, so he gets advantage on the dex save to avoid that swinging blade. Maybe someone ducks, but it's very unlikely they could get under the blade, so they roll with disadvantage. If somebody is clever enough, you might even rule that they avoid the trap without rolling at all. When traps are done right, they're awesome fun, and I hope these tips help you improve yours. Don't forget to share your tips for running exciting traps in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something, if you had a laugh and want more of this kind of content, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And please consider supporting this channel by joining the Adventurers Guild at patreon.com/shortreststudios or by hitting the join button under the video. You know who loves traps? Kobolds. And a lot of DMs aren't using the little guys to their full potential. Find out how to run them right in this video, and I'll see you next time on Short Rest Studios.